The fog clings to the crossroads where wood and iron meet, and a chill breath hovers like a warning over the stones where ages whispered oaths. In the dim glare of dawn, a figure stands still, counting seconds as if they were shards of fate, listening to the distant clank of gallows, the old ritual murmuring through the soil, and the promise of a gift that arrives with a debt etched in bone and memory. The air tastes of iron and ash, as if history itself were sharpening its knives, waiting for the moment when a single choice could tilt the axis of a dozen lifetimes. From the margins of medieval streets to the margins of a man's own soul, the story unfolds in voices that refuse to die, occult sigils drawn in cold, unforgiving light, names carved into timber and grain, the heavy footfalls of silence that follow a rumor deeper than the Mississippi mud. The crossroads are not mere junctions, but doors, where the rain writes petitions on the air and the crowd pretends not to listen while their hearts are listening for a rumor of grandeur. A rumor that burns with the heat of brass horns, of syncopated drums, of a voice that can bend the night itself into a path toward glory or ruin. We stand at the edge of a legend that refuses to stay contained, where the price of sudden ascent echoes through time like a bass note that refuses to fade. The tale threads together medieval rites and modern hunger, linking hangman's winds to the fevered tempo of a bluesman's rise. A chord struck at the very moment a life tilts toward myth. The crossroads loom as both stage and verdict, a place where risk and reverence collide, and where the music in the air carries a warning. Genius can arrive as a miracle, yet the identity it demands may be the echo of someone else's longing, frozen in time and begging to be heard again. Picture this. A dawn fog coils around ancient stones where two roads braid into one, the air tasting of iron and rain. You stand at the threshold of a place where power blooms in the seam between old magic and human fear, where whispers ride the wind like flocks of unseen birds, and every footprint leaves a tremor in the earth. The crossroads loom as a quiet tribunal, a jury of shadows and history, and the weight of the moment presses on your chest as if the sky itself had chosen this instant to press on you the responsibility of listening. In these stones, centuries ago, executioners kept vigil and mystics offered oaths, and the line between sacred and sacrilegious grew thin as a thread. The air is cool and metallic, a taste of distant bells and the scent of tar and smoke, as if the boundary between heaven and hell had been laid down in iron. You imagine the ritual circles etched into the ground, the sigils faintly glowing under moonlight, and you feel the old power rising not from a single chant, but from the accumulation of countless unspoken promises. This is not merely a junction of travel, but a doorway into a lineage of bargains made with the possible and the terrible. A lineage that will echo through the blues and the wheels of fortune. The first truth you sense is urgency. The encrucijada is a living archive, its corners crowded with memories of those who sought escape from scarcity, from disease, from a future that looked like a locked door. You hear the creak of a hanging rope from a distant memory and the soft rasp of a guitar string that never quite forgets its first cry. The ground beneath your feet seems to pulse with a rhythm older than the Mississippi Delta, a heartbeat that knows how a single decision can tilt an entire life toward glory or ruin. The crossroads absorb the light and spit it back as a history lesson in fear and awe, a test of whether you will bear witness to what the ancients feared most, that trust misplaced or dare too much could unchain a chain of consequences that travels through time like a breath through a cavern. And then the scene shifts, as if a veil parts and you glimpse the essence of a pact not written in ink but carved in breath and shadow. It is a pact not with a single demon, but with the world's oldest economies of desire. The hunger for applause, the tremor of the crowd's roar, the ache of poverty salved by a sudden ascent. The encrucijada becomes a theater where every passerby is offered a role in a drama that transcends generations. You can feel the tremor in the trees, hear the distant drumbeat of a morbid parade that promises nothing but a price paid in dawnlight, in sleepless nights, in the currency of memory traded for the illusion of immortality. This moment is the seed from which the blues will grow, a seed watered by fear and watered again by longing, a seed that will sprout into a legend as old as the stones themselves, and as new as the first chord struck in a Mississippi shack. As you stand still, listening to the chorus of the Crossroads, you become part of a longer ritual, a continuum of stories that insist on being remembered. The power here is not merely in what can be given or taken, but in what humans are willing to gamble with when the stakes are life and legend. The Crossroads pressurize time, compressing centuries into a single breath. And in that breath, you hear the whisper of those who chose to pursue the unsparing glitter of fame, even if the price was themselves. You are invited to witness how medieval mystique morphs into modern myth, how the ritual of power can be both a gateway and a verdict, how an offer whispered in a corner could someday become a chorus that shakes the foundations of a musical tradition. The scene ends not with a resolve, but with a question, a doorway left ajar for the listener's own reckoning. What would you trade for a moment of impossible ascent? And how would that trade rewrite your own dream, your own future, your own name etched in the ledger of time? The familiar myth of the deal with the devil has drifted into daylight as a cautionary tale for dreamers. But the truth we chase tonight is older, rougher, and more relentless. The pages of history do not glow with neon certainty. They crackle with the static of uncertain motives. And we stand in a low-lit corridor where popular narratives fade into shadow, revealing instead the bruised faces of those who tasted ambition and learned its price. You feel the cold bite of skepticism in the air, as if the Crossroads itself recoils from easy answers and demands that you strip away comforting fables until only the raw metal of truth remains. This is the moment where the line between myth and memory blurs, and the air thickens with the scent of old blood and the echo of distant brass bands, a reminder that the blues would not exist if desire did not burn with a furnace heat beneath the skin of ordinary lives. To understand the myth, we must first unlearn the postcard image of a silver-tongued stranger in a black coat offering a shortcut to fame. The medieval encrucijada was never merely a place for a secret exchange. It was a stage where culture, law, and fear performed in tandem, where the act of bargaining was as much a social ritual as a personal betrayal. Points on the map that carried the rumor of power, roadways carved by centuries of travel, the stones that absorbed the footfalls of those suspended between hope and ruin, were believed to be conduits for energies beyond ordinary comprehension. In such places, the wall between salvation and damnation wore thin enough to be peeled back with a whispered promise. And those whispers were often the currency of the day. You can hear the murmur of coins, the rustle of parchment, the tremor in a craftsman's hands when his workshop is offered a shortcut to a future he cannot fully envision. The enchantment here is not a single spark, but a continuous flame, fed by the fear of poverty, the hunger for recognition, and the desperate longing to be seen as more than a statistic in a ledger. What emerged from this crucible was not a single tale, but a lattice of stories that traveled across time, mutating with each retelling. The encrucijada becomes a mirror held up to society, reflecting how communities understood risk, virtue, and the loneliness of ascent. In the hands of those who wielded influence in the late medieval and early modern worlds, The exchange could be framed as a sacred pact or a secular contract, depending on the believer's need for explanation. Some saw the ritual as a boundary reach against the encroaching cold of invisibility, a way to convert talent into a visible signal that could cut through the noise. Others warned that the price was more insidious than any demon's tally sheet could contain. A fragmentation of identity, a diminishing of community ties, a sliding scale of loyalty where the self is traded in increments to a higher force that does not forget and rarely forgives. If we follow the thread into the Mississippi of the early 20th century, we encounter the same human tremor, though dressed in different clothing. The blues corridor between Mississippi and Minnesota is lined with stories that rhyme with the old encrucijada. Songs that promise a shortcut to belonging, a way to transpose hardship into resonance, a method to unlock a voice that can travel beyond the reach of circumstance. The legend of a musician who would sell his soul to the devil is not a simple superstition, but a parable of modern life, where fame feels like a sudden falling rain on a drought-stricken field. Yet even here, the myth is a complicated braid of truth and invention. The story survives because it expresses a truth too large to state plainly: the fear that talent, in a world of scarcity, might be so precious that the cost of its recognition is, in fact, one's own essence. The refrain of the legend, the fear that the price of talent is not simply money, but time, memory, and a sense of inner equanimity, resonates through decades and genres, till it becomes a shared language for musicians who chase a dream that seems almost metaphysical in origin. We should also consider the social economy that shapes these tales. The encrucijada is not merely about the devil's ledger. It is about the ledger of a community that measures worth by the velocity of assent and the loudness of applause. In a world where life is precarious and surveillance is a persistent neighbor, any shortcut to recognition can appear not only tempting, but necessary. The myth becomes a lens through which people interpret risk. If success seems to appear too quickly, we suspect a hidden price. The paradox is that this suspicion itself can propel a craftsman toward mastery, forcing a deeper form of artistry to emerge as a counter to the promise of a supernatural shortcut. The true tragedy is not the idea of a bargain made in blood, but the realization that the longing to escape the ordinary can bind the self to a path from which there is no easy return. In the end, the narrative insists on complexity rather than clarity. The Disney version of the tale, transparent. Villains, straightforward bargains, and jubilant endings, belongs to a world that wants its myths tidy, its morals hard-coded, its heroes neatly separated from the shadows. But history rarely yields such neat delineations. The real stories, the ones that survived the centuries and found their way into the blues and beyond, are built from uneasy compromises, quiet betrayals, and a fearsome conviction that greatness often arrives on the heels of self-dissolution. You are left with a map that looks like a tangle of rivers rather than a straight road, reminding you that the most compelling legends are those that make you question not only the choice to accept a bargain, but the choice to keep faith with your own truth when the world insists on measuring it in dollars and applause. The chamber before the crossroads breathes like a sleeping giant, walls lined with the quiet echo of footsteps that never quite settle. A single lamp flickers, throwing long silhouettes that seem to move with memory, as if the past itself had learned to walk again and chosen this room to rest between storms. You feel the weight of what you carry, not a weapon or a coin, but a question that has haunted every age. What remains when a life is measured by sound rather than certainty? In this hall of choices, the most stubborn truth is the cost of listening. Voices rise from the stones as if the earth itself hosts a choir of witnesses, old accounts that tally courage, fear, and the stubborn impulse to press beyond the edge of what is known. The Crossroads, once a bright blade in the night, now resemble a patient teacher whose lessons arrive in whispers, urging you to examine motive, risk, and the invisible lines that separate ambition from ruin. You notice how the air changes when a name is spoken aloud, how the gravity of a single memory can bend time, drawing you toward a decision you have not yet imagined. The chapter unfolds through the cadence of memory and the cadence of blues. For the music that travels from a dusty church pew to a crowded club is a map of restraint and release. The legends of the encrucijada teach that every gain comes with a reflection, a mirror held up to the face of the one who dares to reach for a brighter morning. In the glare of amber light, you glimpse the faces of players who believed they could negotiate with fate and discovered that fate negotiates with them in turn, rewriting the terms until the original dream is worn thin by time and memory. The symbols here are simple and stubborn: a tremolo in a guitar string, a bottle left half empty on a table, a ledger that sighs with the weight of names entered and crossed out. Each detail becomes a syllable in a broader chant about ascent and erosion, about how a voice can rise and then be tempered by the knowing that what shines on the surface hides a deeper current beneath. As the room breathes, you understand that the crossroads do not vanish when a bargain is struck. They migrate, like a river that changes its course after a flood, leaving behind new channels that carry old currents. The myth adapts, and with each adaptation, something essential shifts. The fear of being seen too late, the dread of becoming a statistic in a ledger, the ache of a childhood silenced by scarcity that now demands a louder, more defiant chorus. You hear the cadence of a drummer counting a rhythm that no one else can hear, a pulse that's synchronized with your own heartbeat the moment you step through the door. This is not about choosing a single fate, but about choosing a way to endure the consequence of a choice that already chose you. In the depths of the antechamber, memory becomes a guide and perhaps a warning. The encrucijada reveals itself not as a single event, but as a sequence of moments, each insisting on being understood, and then released into the longer story of a city, a genre, a people who mapped longing onto strings and bars, who learned to survive by turning fear into rhythm. The chapter invites you to walk the line again, to listen for what the blues can teach about patience, about crafting an identity that can carry both weight and light. And as the door loosens its hold on the night, you sense a final question forming in the throat of the crossroads. When power comes calling, how loud can a life insist on being heard without becoming the echo of something sacrificed beyond memory? The room beyond the antechamber opens like a chest of secrets, each drawer containing a decision that could tilt a life toward dawn or toward shadow. A soft hum threads through the air, the sound of distant keys turning in locks, and you sense that the crossroads are not only a place of bargains, but a library of consequences, each shelf a memory that chose to endure. The lamps burn with a stubborn warmth, casting halos around objects that seem ordinary until their hidden histories reveal themselves in quicksilver reflections on the walls. You notice a ledger resting on a carved stand, its pages whispering with the weight of unspoken bargains, the ink alive with the tremor of every hand that has written, crossed out, and rewritten their fate. In this chapter, the tension narrows to the choices that often go unseen. The small compromises, the polite smiles that hide a deeper hunger, the nights spent counting what might be gained if one only walked a little farther along the line. This ledger does not glow with neon certainty, but with the dull, the dull, insistent gleam of truth. The truth that every decision leaves a trace in the air, a trace that can be followed by those who listen with their eyes and feel with their ears. The Encrucijada reveals that power can be a patient, lengthy process, not a single dramatic leap, and that the most profound bargains are often whispered in hours when the room is empty, yet full of the echo of other lives turning their corners. You stand with the weight of countless possibilities pressing against your ribs, and the sense that the moment you choose to act will become a chapter remembered by time itself. Sometimes the price of choice is not paid in gold or in a loud, visible sacrifice, but in the quiet erosion of a personal world. A friendship frayed by loyalty, a memory dimmed by prudence, a dream adjusted to fit the contours of what others deem prudent. The ledger lists these costs with the same gravity that marks a church tablet. Each line a vow kept or broken that quietly reshapes a future into something closer to necessity than to desire. The music that travels from the Mississippi to the world beyond has learned to hum in minor keys whenever the tally grows heavy. For the blues knows that every gain has a correspondent downbeat. A moment when the crowd cheers, but someone in the chorus sighs and remembers a promise not kept or a truth not told at the right time. The crossroad, in this light, becomes less a doorway to power and more a mirror that reveals the shape of a life when seen from the other side of ambition. The chapter pushes you to measure courage, not by the thunder of a dramatic choice, but by the steadiness of daily acts. Showing up, keeping faith with a song even when the room is empty, choosing to practice honesty as rigorously as technique. In this way, the Encrucijada becomes a teacher who does not promise miracles, but perseverance, who asks you to weigh what you can live with after the point where the crowd has forgotten your name. The ledger's pages turn with a sound that resembles the turning of a well-worn record, an audible reminder that history does not sleep and that every rhythm, every tempo shift marks a decision that could alter the course of a career, a family, a community. You glimpse silhouettes of past players whose stories echo in the margins. A guitarist who kept faith with a simpler dream. A singer who traded a moment of explosive popularity for the slower work of craft. A composer who learned that restraint can be a form of daring. These echoes remind you that the most enduring legacies are not built on a single moment of peril, but on a long weathering of doubt, of missteps corrected through stubborn practice, of resilience in the face of silence. As the ledger eventually closes with a soft sigh, you understand that there is a final moral here that the old tales often forget to articulate. Power that is earned through honest labor carries a different kind of magnetism, a gravity that does not tempt with shortcuts, but invites with trust. The crossroads can reward patience with a consistent, growing truth. That one's art, once anchored in integrity, can outlast the glitter of overnight ascent and become a beacon for others who seek a sustainable path through the storms. The room seems to exhale, and the memories gathered here drift like leaves across a forgotten stream. Each one a suggestion that when you choose to remain true to your own rhythm, you do not merely survive the surge of attention. You refine your voice until it becomes a lighthouse for those who wander in the dark valleys between fame and authenticity. You leave the chamber with the ledger in your hands, not as a prison, but as a compass, a reminder that every line written is a pledge to a future that honors both the hunger for greatness and the discipline that guards the soul from selling too much of itself for a single note of applause. The final chamber opens like a breath held for a long time, and you step into a space where light pools softly on a floor of dark timber, each plank telling a story of hands that built, traded, and waited. The air is calmer here, Yet the silence carries more history than the loudest room you've walked through. A silence that invites you to listen not with ears, but with every fiber of your being, to hear the rustle of decisions that refuse to be forgotten. A neat arrangement of chairs faces a single, plain table where a ledger rests, its spine worn, its pages kept safe by a careful hand that understands the weight of each promise and the gravity of each breach. In this final reckoning, the crossroads become a classroom where the students are memory and consequence. You notice the careful geometry of the room, the way the light falls at a precise angle to illuminate a specific corner, as if destiny itself arranged the scene to teach a precise lesson. Power is not a gift, but a test of integrity and restraint. The ledger's margins are crowded with names and dates, but the handwriting here speaks to another truth. The quiet arithmetic of a life measured not by applause, but by the absence of regret. The encrucijada has delivered its verdict in soft terms, not a thunderclap, and the verdict sounds like a practiced musician pausing between phrases, allowing the audience to breathe, to reflect, to choose again if the moment asks for it. Stories that began with a spark of ambition end in many colors. In this room you witness the spectrum. Some lines in the ledger glow with a warm, humane glow, suggesting bargains made with a clear heart and a stubborn commitment to craft, where fame arrived as a companion to discipline rather than a conqueror. Other lines are cooler, edged with the cold precision of a calculation that turns art into market, time into currency, and memory into a ledger entry that cannot be erased but can be balanced against a lifetime of honesty, service, and fragile grace. The room reminds you that the true scale of any legend is not the height of its rise, but the depth of its remaining in the world, after the crowds have dispersed and the echoes of applause fade to a whisper noir. The music that travels from dusty rooms to crowded stages remains a witness here, a living testament to the idea that the best art survives by thriving in the honest weather of inner life more than the flashy weather of public acclaim. As you move through the reckoning, you encounter a final, practical truth. Choices are not a singular act, but a cadence, a sequence that pours from one moment into the next and shapes itself into a continuum of consequence. The encrucijada, which once appeared as a doorway to sudden ascent, reveals itself as a tutor who demands practice, patience, and fidelity to a personal code. You feel the weight of the vows that have stood between you and oblivion. The quiet promises you have kept to your own heart and to the people who believed in your voice enough to listen. The room's air shifts with the memory of those who walked before you, their footsteps echoing softly as if to remind you that legacy is not a trophy, but a responsibility. A responsibility to nurture what you love and to resist the lure of shortcuts that would hollow out your essence. When you finally face the ledger for the last time, the lesson lands with a compassionate gravitas. Power that endures is that which can be spoken into the next generation without fear, that can be shared with others who deserve a chance to rise, and that can be earned again and again through humility, craft, and solidarity. The crossroads do not disappear. They recede into the distance, becoming a pattern you carry within you, a guiding map for a life lived with intention rather than impulse. And as you step back into the corridor that leads toward dawn, you carry not a trophy, but a quiet reckoning, a sense of having walked through a trial that refined you rather than defined you. The chapter closes with a single, steady note, a reminder that the most enduring power is the power to remain oneself when the world asks for everything, and that the truest legacy is the harmony forged between talent and conscience, a harmony that endures beyond seasons and cities, beyond the bright glare of applause and into the steady, patient light of craft. The corridor beyond the final chamber repeats with a softer footfall, as if the building itself remembers every step that led a traveler here. A subtle chorus of distant voices rises and falls, the kind of harmony that belongs to memory more than moment, suggesting that return is not a simple reversal, but a reorientation of purpose. You pause at the threshold, feeling the weight of the ledger you carried, now lighter in your hands, but heavier in your heart. A reminder that every decision leaves a trace that refuses to be erased by time. The air carries a gentle tang of rain and old wood, and in that scent you sense the promise of renewal, a chance to redeem what was nearly lost and to rebind your art to a vow made long ago to stay true under pressure. In this final movement, the story loops back toward the questions that began the journey, not with a loud declaration, but with a patient listening. The room seems to expand, not with grandiosity, but with a quiet invitation to re-examine motive, to test whether the miracles of talent have ever required a sacrifice beyond what a person can bear without losing their essential self. The encrucijada appears once again, not as a trap, but as a tutor that asks for ongoing devotion, to discipline, to community, to the truth that art belongs to those who endure without surrendering what makes a life truly theirs. The melodies of the blues, once seen as pathways to escape, now read as routes to belonging, channels through which a person can share more of themselves with the world while keeping the core compass steady. You walk toward the room's far end, where a window frames a horizon that seems both new and familiar. Beyond the glass, the dawn gathers with the same patient tempo that governs a well-practiced performance, counting beats while a chorus of early birds catches the last faint notes of night. It is here that the narrative asserts a tempered optimism. That mastery, when anchored in integrity and communal care, can sustain a life in which brilliance and responsibility walk hand in hand. The ledger's pages reappear in memory, but now their margins glow with a soft, approving light, as if every name that once triggered a fearsome tally has earned its place in a larger, more forgiving ledger. The ledger of shared craft, mentorship offered and received, and a chorus of voices that sing in harmony with the one who stayed true under pressure. The image of a musician practicing late into the evening returns, not as a solitary figure wrestling with fate, but as a neighbor in a neighborhood built by countless acts of generosity, a teacher offering guidance, a colleague sharing a syllable of encouragement, a fan who sticks by the sound even when it costs more than money to sustain. The chapter closes with a quiet vow spoken into the rising light, a vow that power, when earned honestly, becomes a conduit for others rather than a personal trophy. The crossroads fade into background memory, not erased, but transformed. A map folded into the lining of a musician's coat to be opened in times of doubt. The final image is intimate and humane. A hand steadying a tremolo, a breath restoring rhythm to a heartbeat, a chorus that gathers strength not from the peril of grabbing glory, but from the discipline of walking toward it with care. In this return, you discover that the true resonance of the encrucijada is not in the moment of choice, but in the ongoing practice of choosing well every day. In the practice of listening to the room, to the audience, and to the deepest voice. Within that keeps pointing toward a future where art remains a gift shared with a community, not a secret kept for oneself.